I am Reverend Mark Hughes, and I'm with the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. Welcome to Juxtaposition. It's great to be back this evening. This is a program about issues affecting black folks and black folks affecting change. Again, good evening. I am stoked to be back with you again today and coming to you with episode 3, Hiding Behind Objectivity. Hiding behind objectivity. First, we are saddened over the senseless killing of Hussein Mubarak, just blocks from the Richard Kim Center and from where I reside on Thursday evening. The family is less than 1 degree of separation from the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance family, and our hearts go out to the family, and we mourn this tragic loss. It is shameful that some would use this difficult situation to gain political points with the same old tired dog whistles of the past. We're going to keep doing the work, and we're going to honor Hussein's life by continuing to speak truth to power and implementing the programs and services our community that positively impact our community and the lives of people as we roll them out in the Richard Kim Center. The programming that we'll be rolling out will not just honor Hussein's life, but as we contemplate programs like Credible Messenger, and as we arrive at conclusions on how we're here to assist to get guns off the street from methods of amnesty and otherwise, we will stand in support of not just a just community, but also a safe community. I'm joined today by Vincent Mitchell, Director of Youth Culture, to chat about an aspect of work that many people don't want to talk about. And that is the issue of the notion of objectivity for cover or inaction in the work of eradicating systemic racism. So welcome, Vincent. It's so awesome to have you here with you, my brother. What's going on?
Mark, it's an honor to be here, and it's a pleasure. And I just want to say that I appreciate you taking the time to speak about the Mubarak family. You know, my heart definitely goes out to the family. I've been so fortunate to be in their lives, not only in the community, but in the school system as well. Yeah. And like you said, it's saddened because we still have a lot of work to do to get ahead of, you know, these senseless crimes that's being brought upon our people. And I think that more than anything, we need a lot of love and support to shed upon that family. So, you know, I just wanted to say to the Mubarak family, we're here for you, and anything you need, we're right here.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. And I know we talked off camera before we started the program today, and we were talking a little bit about the family. It's such a tragic loss and just a really incredibly difficult time for this community, for our community. So I appreciate brothers who are standing with me, brothers who are standing in the community like you, and that's why I was so excited to have you on the program tonight. So thanks. And we didn't coordinate these shirts, right? We didn't coordinate this.
We sure didn't. I thought you was actually looking in my closet for a second, but it just so happened to roll out like that.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things to consider as we're doing the work, and this is, I think, where I came from with this idea, was I was looking at some of the implementation work that we're doing and rolling out some of the things, many of the programs, whether it is the reparations task force here in the city of Burlington, or whether it's the racial disparities in the criminal and juvenile justice system, and that advisory panel, and how is that work being done? Where is it being done? Who is it impacting? Is it satisfying just the letter of the policy, or is it actually accomplishing the essence of what it is that we sought or intended to do? So in thinking about that, you see a lot of folks dragging their feet. You see a lot of folks that are not willing to step up and get the work done. Now, of course, it was hard to get the ball across the finish line, but it got me thinking. It got me thinking about just, you know, this whole idea about what are we measuring, what are we paying attention to? And I came across, check this slide out right here. I came across this quote, and it says, far too many social scientists waited to issue analytical pronouncements about the potential impact of a Trump victory. Some argued that they did not have systematic data on the matter at hand, and others that it was not their place to comment on politics. Much like Max Weber, they hid behind objectivity to say or do nothing, or to say or do anything, while the wind of authoritarianism was clearly blowing with hurricane force in the nation. I'll leave it there. But just thinking about that, how that was laid down, it's resonated with me so much as I was thinking about inaction. I was thinking about why people choose not to do certain things, or why people end up even creating obstacles sometimes. You ever experience that?
Well, absolutely, and I think what you're talking to and what you're speaking to, if it's not affecting them, then they don't see it. It's like you're walking around with your eyes wide shut, and I think that's what's really hurting our community.
Yeah.
This rigidity, if you may, that protects a culture and a people that doesn't really represent our people.
Right, right.
And I think it's time that action is definitely put into place, into having more programs in that speaks to that and that provides opportunity for us to really illuminate and highlight some of these things that aren't really working.
No doubt, no doubt. I was just thinking that one of the challenges that we have with the movement in the course of creating these programs and these policies to address systemic racism is the notion of objectivity. Just this plays out more tragically in the implementation phase, it seems like, but just the whole notion of objectivity. So I took some time and I was thinking about it, and is defined as expressing or dealing with facts or conditions as perceived without distortion by personal feelings, prejudices, or interpretations. And I got to thinking about that thing is how are we going to deal with our nation's history? How are we going to deal with who we are as a nation, that as a nation built in genocide and in slavery and perpetuated all the way, with these badges and incidents of slavery that we refer to as systemic racism that are consistently producing disparate adverse outcomes for black and brown folks, and do that in a way to where we're not getting our feelings and prejudices and interpretations wrapped up in it. To me, it would seem like you'd almost have to be like a zombie to sit back and look at what is really going on and what has really happened, and not sit there and process that and get emotional about it. And matter of fact, maybe even get mad.
Great point. And you just hit it right on the nail. Like I said, as I mentioned before, white fragility is real. It's here, it's present, and until it's impacted by them, or it's coming towards their doorstep, it really isn't a conversation. And it's about that time that we can no longer just stand front to be able to tolerate or even continue to allow this to happen without speaking it out and calling it out, because having said nothing is also a decision, and it's always a time to speak up and be humble, and it's that time to speak up.
It's that time to speak up. It's my assertion that it's just not possible when dealing with the realities of the root causes and the impacts of systemic racism to seriously be objective. Take a look at these next couple of slides I want to show you. And what I really want to unpack here, and this is just a high-level 30,000 foot view going at 60 miles an hour. We just rushed through some national history, whether it's the 1619 conversation, the story of compromise with the dilapidation of Reconstruction, or whether we have a president watching Birth of a Nation in the Oval Office, from redlining to the GI Bill, which was really the white GI Bill, and on and on and on, all the way to the white lash that we're currently experiencing as a nation, and what this thing that we call white nationalism. For those of you who are watching TV, I think that there is a lot to speak about in terms of the fabric of this nation. And so we can't forget where we come from. It's impossible. And I guess what I'm getting at here is it befuddles me to to try to understand how somebody can take a look at just life, take a look at any situation, take a look at what we're experiencing as a nation, take a look at your employment situation, take a look at what's happening, what's unfolding in our communities and so forth, and not somehow or another be able to view it through a lens of where we've come from as a nation. And I say it frequently, but there's no wonder why on January 6th there were Confederate flags being carried through the United States Capitol by a crowd that was 99% white. So we can't sit back in our objectivity say, oh well, I don't know if there's enough numbers in. I think I might want to reconsider. I might want to consider this. I may want to figure out if there's more for us to understand. You know, and even in the creation of wealth in this nation, in the slide that we're looking at right now, and this list is, clearly not exhaustive, but, you know, we can go through whether it, you know, the Homestead Act of 1862, where 270 million acres were given away to white people in this nation, or whether we just want to talk about redlining in America, or even transportation projects that are going through black neighborhoods, even the Champlain Parkway here in the city of Burlington. So we see that there is so much that we need to take into consideration. Thank you for that slide. In terms of, you know, making some subjective decisions about what it is we want to support or the work that we want to do, particularly as it pertains to the eradication of systemic racism. Your thoughts?
It's all over, Mark, that it's so obvious, and it's so, like I said, I worked in the school system, and, you know, what's sad sometimes to witness and see is that, you know, we have people in positions that's trying to teach our culture without really learning and trying to tap in to understand one's culture. And that's problematic, because if you don't really take the time to really meet the person where they are and where they're at, how do you where's the connection?
Right.
And I think things are getting suspended in terms of connection and opportunities to where you see a lot of our people in power in ways of leadership as well. I think what we're seeing is the opposite of that. We're seeing, you know, the system come at our people of power and position who are, you know, African American descent and trying to make change. And, you know, I think that we need to collectively come as a unified front and not let one go down. As, you know, if you're standing by yourself, sometimes you're not prevalent to be as strong as if you have a lot of numbers that represent and come behind you. So I think what we need to do ultimately is really come together and unify and continue to speak out and speak up to the injustice and to the disparities that we see, and really interrupt the status quo.
Interrupt the status quo. And there's so much that goes into this conversation as I was considering the discussion, because, you know, one of the things that we're looking at here is obviously, you know, the work. You know, what are we doing to advance this cause? And what we've been rooted in here at the Alliance since day one has been eradicating systemic racism, and what that means to any given person is pretty important. Take a look at this next slide and just, you know, think about the numbers, because the numbers are pretty staggering. And if those who are watching, you can go out to the website and take a look, because we also have some numbers that are unique to Burlington. As a matter of fact, our numbers indicated that there was about 13 black folks in Burlington that owned houses, for example. You know, those are how staggering these numbers are. You start look at this 0.2%. 0.2% of Vermont farms are owned by black folks. Now, if we were to talk about any one of these particular categories, then we would be having a conversation and we would debate, and perhaps we could be objective. We could have an objective conversation. Maybe if the history of the United States and the distribution of wealth aforementioned in these previous slides were not facts and they did not exist, perhaps we would be having a different conversation. But we've got to contextualize all of this data collectively. And I think the problem is maybe it might be making some people's heads blow off, or perhaps they just don't want to fully embrace what this is actually communicating. So we see that there are so many things that are happening. And I like to always say, you know, perhaps it's just a matter of the fact that maybe black folks are just incredibly unfortunate people, and they're really unlucky, like maybe Sleprock on Flintstones, or maybe it was one of those things where it's just a series of unfortunate events like Lemony Snicket's. But I think we all know better. So, and we're just going to go into that next slide. I think the issue here is what we're dealing with systems, and that's why it's so important to be having these conversations about who's at the table, about who's who's stepping in, who's leaning into the work, who's making the decisions to actually commit themselves to the work. So here we see the unjustly political economic power of whites, the continued economic and other resource inequalities along racial lines. But then we also have the emotion-laden racist framing created by whites to maintain and rationalize privilege and power. The heart of what we came to talk about today is this, is how many people actually believe this?
That's a great question.
How many people actually believe this? And I think that was one of the things, my brother, that came to me, because you know what we've been counting is we've been saying, well, where is the quantitative data? And you just saw the quantitative data on the red cards that I just showed you. And then many would say, where's the qualitative data? And you'll see much of that on our site as well. We've collected volumes of qualitative data. And that's kind of how we've processed a lot of this, a lot of reasoning in terms of whether we actually do something or not. You see a lot of decision makers and policy makers, they say, well, we don't have the data, and they keep it moving. Or you may get the quantitative data and they say, well, this is just quantitative data. There's a story behind it. You haven't contextualized it. Where's the qualitative data? And we can play that game until the cows come home. And we have. And we have. And a lot of it is because of the objectivity of the people that we're actually working with, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
So I'm thinking, where we took the turn here then is what we're starting to look at now is well, take a look at this next slide, is what if we were to measure who actually believes in this stuff? What if we were to measure that? This says that a majority of Americans, this is only 58%, they acknowledge that racism is built into the American economy, government. We're just going to say this is systemic. And the view is unevenly held across racial groups. There is 83% of black Americans that agree that the system is stacked against us, where only 50% of white Americans believe the same. Only 50%, but it gets worse, you see, because the majority, so you got 58%, they say the nation needs to continue to change and create an equal playing field. And so you got 58%. But if you look at this, the strong majority there, you got 89% of blacks say we got to do better, and you only got 51% of white people saying we got to do better. Now, that's not even taking into account who actually shows up for the work, who actually shows up for implementation. It ebbs and flows, and we do see a lot of people showing up when it's time to try to push something over the finish line. Thank you for that slide. But what we can do is if we take a step back, what we come to understand is that a lot of people disappear. Many of them are running victory laps. Some of them still are. Some of them just went home because they're tired. But when it comes to implementation, when it comes to showing up at the racial equity panel, when it comes to showing up at the racial racial disparities in the criminal and juvenile justice system advisory panel, when it comes to showing up at the health equity advisory panel, when it comes to showing up at the reparations task force, and the list goes on, what we find is many of these folks are nowhere to be found. And this is where the work is actually getting done. Your thoughts?
I think what we really need to do is take a step back and really think about what's gonna stand, what's gonna last. And you know, we had this discussion a little bit before we came on, and I think we hit it right on the nose where, you know, we have to align our values up. Values have to be the top priority of our direction and our pathway, because nothing stands higher or above values.
Amen.
And if we can get to a point where collectively, if you're a part of the Racial Justice Alliance and you know the direction that we're moving is from a value standpoint, and if you're not on board with that, then it's going to be hard for us to really push the message forward.
Right.
So I think, you know, just starting there, you know, at the beginning is where we really have to, you know, stand up and shape these things.
Absolutely, and it's interesting that you brought up the values thing, because I was thinking about, so what, and my, you know, one of my ministers in my church taught me that, you know, my pastor when I was young, you know, we'd go through a whole Bible lesson, we'd be sitting there talking, and I'd be like, yeah, pastor, you know, and we'd read a scripture, and I was like, I got it, you know, and he's like, so what? And I'm like, what, right? He's like, he said, so what? Right. So
what you gonna do?
So what's the next step? Right.
What's the next step?
Exactly. Right. So and that's the thing, you know, with this whole conversation, you know, it's important. You know, somebody said, you know, this is a bluster. There's just this conversation. Where's it going? It doesn't mean anything. Are you criticizing white people again? Whatever. You know, the thing here is that there are a lot of people who do not want people to understand and to recognize and to embrace the fact that systemic racism is a thing.
Correct.
Period.
Correct.
That's what the whole critical race theory is all about. It's number one, to attack the school system, the public school system, as they always have. And number two, bury the concept of systemic racism. It does not exist. If I can get you to believe that, then why would we want to create a health equity task force? Why would we want to create economic development for black and brown communities? Why would we want, and the list goes on and on. And here's the thing, is we can't do nothing without white people, and they can't do nothing without us.
Goes hand in hand.
Because at the end of the day, half of the white people don't even believe this thing is a thing. And many of those don't show up, which means they need black folks to tip the scale. So when you think about what we're doing, yes, there are many of us who show up, but we were low in numbers at 13.4% of the general population. And half the time, half of us ain't showing up. Some of us don't care. Some of us too busy just trying to make the struggle. So we need the white vote. So that's one of the things we always got to remember in this work. I see we're closing in on time, but we're talking about values here. It's just, I want to piggyback. I'm going to steal that. As a matter of fact, I'm taking that with me. When we leave here, when I walk out of here, I'm gonna swear it was my idea. I'm lying. But having that thing where we're talking about, there is no one person in an organization, there's no one person in a community, there's no one person in a school, there's no one person at work, there's no one person in a government that their desires and their agenda, it raises to a level where it's above the collective values of the organization. And if they think that's the case, and if they choose to butt up against those values, then somebody's got to be willing to say bye-bye.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mark, you hit it right on the nose, good brother. Right on the nose, good brother. You hit it right on the nose. And you know, like you said, we can't be just talking all day. We have to really put boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
And get moving.
Got to do something.
Got to do something.
Got to do something. So watch this. I'm going to go back over to a slide. I think this might be one of my last graphics that I have for you. Ooh. Check this out. Ooh. Abolish slavery. We lifted the campaign off. I'm excited to tell you that we did indeed lift the campaign off. We've got it done. It's up. It's running. So I just want to give y'all who are listening right now just a little bit of a heads up. The campaign established by the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance Interfaith committed to the passage of voting for this whole proposal to a constitutional amendment that established that slavery and indentured servitude are prohibited in all forms. This campaign kicked off over Juneteenth weekend with a goal of raising 180,000 yes votes. We're on our way. This is how you get involved. Contact Melissa or Isaac. Grab that information there. I want to take you back as we continue to share here. There's this comment here. And yeah, go ahead and pull that last slide up again. So there's a comment here this brevity of this response. This is that whole quote, it's a republic if we can keep it. The brevity of the response, it should not cause us to undervalue its essential meaning. Democratic republics are not merely founded upon the consent of the people. They are also absolutely dependent upon the active and informed involvement of the people for their continued good health. So get involved, everybody. That's what we're here to tell you. Get involved. Like you said, boots on the ground. That's all we have for you tonight. Thank y'all for coming out tonight. This has been the third episode. And don't be objective, get busy. This has been the third episode of Juxtaposition. I'm glad to have had my guest with me, Vincent Mitchell. Thank you for coming. Get busy, get some boots on the ground. Good night.
Good night.